Hi guys, welcome back. Today is our Ask a Dietitian Day. I'm so excited and happy to be here with you guys. We've gotten a few questions over our DM, so I definitely want to make sure I address those. Remember that you guys are able to ask us any questions on today, whether you guys are joining us live, or you guys, like I said, you guys can DM us, email us, because we definitely want to be here to help you guys accomplish your goals and give you guys the evidence behind everything. So remember, guys, on the third week of every month, I'll be here answering any questions that you guys may have about either body composition, diets, fitness practices. I don't know everything, so if I don't know the answer to a question, I will definitely make sure to get back to you on that, because I definitely want to make sure that I look up, what the science says, what the evidence is, then give you guys that, then you guys decide what to do with that. One of the things that I want to highlight and make sure you guys kind of are aware of. Somebody asked me once about different dietary practices and if these were good, right? And at that point, I asked them a question that I feel like maybe a lot of us don't ask ourselves, and that is, does this apply to you, right? Does this apply to which population, right? And I believe this one was like an intermittent fasting question, and they asked me like, is intermittent good? And I said, well, is it good for who? You, the different types of populations that, there are some populations that benefit from that. So remember, when it comes to any dietary practices, you want to make sure that if you're trying to follow that it will benefit you, right? If you're not sure, make sure to ask your doctor or a registered dietitian. You're more than welcome to ask us, guys. Like I said, we'll go ahead and try to answer as many of these questions for you. So in terms of one of the questions that we got asked was from our friend Sandra. Hi, Sandra. We miss you. We love you. And she asked me about intermittent fasting and how does it work and who is it good for, right? So I definitely want to make sure I start off with that one. So there are populations that can benefit from that, from intermittent fasting. So I looked it up, and this is the most up-to-date information. Like I said, I haven't memorized it, so I make sure to write it down. So those that could benefit from that are those undergoing cancer treatment or with some cancers, right? Those in the pre-diabetic or diabetic populations, those with metabolic disorders, those with hypertension or cardiovascular diseases, those who suffer from overweight or obesity, those with neurological disorders, and cognitive disorders, as well as those with IBS and and some autoimmune disorders. So these are the population that, as of now, the research shows that it does help. The ones that it's contraindicated for, meaning that we don't really recommend it for these populations, are children, pregnant women, lactating women, those with bone density loss, a history of disorder eating or at risk of disorder eating, type 1 diabetes, those with CKD, people with high stress demands. Okay, I think that might be like 98% of the population, I feel like. Those with, like I said, high stress demands, and people with low body fat percentages. Outside of that, like I said, consult your doctor and consult your registered dietitians, to see if something does fall into the lines of that. Another question that I got asked by another one of our really, really good friends, I believe her name is Chandra. So Chandra, shout out to you if you're listening to this. So she asked me, is it possible to lose body fat drinking alcohol? And the short answer to that is yes. However, the process will be a lot slower. And the reason for that is because unlike proteins, carbohydrates, and fats that are also the other macronutrients, right? We didn't consider alcohol a macronutrient because technically it doesn't give us any nutrients. It just gives us calories, right? So alcohol, the way it gets metabolized or broken down in the liver, think about this as as a flour, okay? And in each of the components of that flour, right, are the different chemical bonds that make up the alcohol molecule, right? And as your body is snipping those away to use them for energy, right? Because like I said, alcohol also has calories in it. Unlike the other macronutrients that where your organs can use them, alcohol is with toxins. So your body's just really trying to get rid of it, as fast as it can. So what it does, it signals your body to start packaging it into body fat, if it can't really, and go like, go into your adipose cells, your fat cells, right? If it can't really go through the liver and stuff like that. So there is two molecules, and I don't want to get too sciencey on this, right? But your body essentially senses the extra hydrogen ions that are being left out, right? Because from breaking down the alcohol molecule, and this is what signals what we call lipogenesis, right? Or the making of the body fat to go into that fat cell. So although it is possible, right, it is possible that you are in a calorie deficit to lose body fat, and it is and even if you consume alcohol, but usually this process is slow down a lot. So we usually recommend people that they try to limit their drinking through their fat loss phase. And remember, this doesn't mean that they have to cut them out altogether, right? Because if there are social drinkers, if there are things that they're doing on the weekends, right, we definitely want to make sure that we give people, people are people. People, they're not machines, right? It's not like I can push a button and be like fat loss mode, right? If it was that easy, I feel like a lot more of us would be kind of keen to that, and just being able to do that. So don't get discouraged if like I said, if you're seeing a slower fat loss progress, just know that, once again, the number one reason why people are unable to reach their goals, right, in my experience and in my practice, is because they think they're consuming less calories than they actually are, and they think they're using or expending more calories than they actually are, right? So, and this is true, by the way, of all human beings. Any human being that has been on a fitness journey has at some point realized that, even myself, okay? So I feel like, kind of keeping a tab on your numbers. If numbers overwhelm you, remember that you don't have to track calories, right? I often use hand measurements. This is another question from one of our other friends, Lisa. So Lisa, you asked me if, she mentioned something along the lines of like, hey, I don't want to, use a calorie counter. I don't like counting calories. I'm not a numbers person, right? That's really easy. So we often use the hand measurement guidelines, right? So this is where you can use a palm of protein, right? Like a cupful or a handful of carbs and a thumb of fat. And what does that look like, right? So I often tell people, if you're going, out to eat, or if you're going to be eating, let's say a piece of steak, right? That piece of steak should be not just the circumference of your palm, but also the thickness of your palm. Like there are some proteins out there, like some fishes that are very, very thin, right? So in that case, to those fishes, I will literally like kind of stack the fillets on top of one another, and that would probably equal to the thickness of my hand. So that's what I would probably do. Right. Now, another thing to consider when you're using hand measurements is that make sure that if your protein is a lean protein, otherwise counted as a protein as a fat, right? For my practice, the way I show my clients is that any red meat counts as a protein and a fat. So essentially, if they're making their plate, right, out of a protein, carb, and a fat, they're going to have their protein and their fat with their steak, right? And then now they just need to worry about their carbs. So 1 to 2 carbs per meal, right? What does that look like? So let's say you're having lunch, right? So 1 to 2 carbs per meal of of a lunch would be like maybe that steak with a cup full or whatever would fit in your hand of rice, right? And a fistful of veggies, right? And that would really, really kind of hit your macronutrients. Believe it or not, our hands are really good measurement tools for what your body, for your height and your size needs, right? As you guys will see, some people that are taller, as the people get taller, their hands get bigger, right? And that's the reason for that, because we can literally use our hands, to kind of reach our goals. And it's just pretty cool for the people that don't want to, like I said, calorie count, or they don't want to measure or weigh things, right? Some people have asked me, well, Carla, how much do I know what this is? Well, this is where I really recommend doing this maybe once or twice, right? Maybe not every time that you eat, right? But in the past, this is how I became aware of what a handful of carb was for me, right? I literally cooked up some rice, right? And I knew I was going to throw some of it away, right? Because I literally like scooped some rice into my hand, and like I think I put it with a measuring cup, and I wasn't really measuring it. I was just using it to put it on my hand, right? And then from there, I like plopped that onto my plate, and just kind of for myself to kind of give myself a visual of what that would look like, right? So after that, I was like, oh, okay. So like about a third, like a third to a fourth of the plate is what like my body needs, right? Now, yes, remember that the size of the plate will matter. So if you have like a humongous plate, right? But usually a regular serving plate, I kind of eyeball that. So that became very, very handy, especially when I go out to conferences, or when I go out to places or hotels where, they'll have like a brunch style or a buffet style thing, where I don't measure, things when I go. I've actually kind of, done a lot of measuring throughout my life. So I'm very, very aware of that. But even back then, when I was first starting, like I didn't walk around with a measuring cup or something like that. I didn't know what a third of a cup was, right? So that's how I started. And then, I used to always use a rule of thumb that I still to this day, use with some of my patients, that ain't nobody ever got fat off of vegetables, right? So as long as those vegetables didn't have extra oils or anything like that, I would go ahead and just put as many veggies as I wanted, right? So the rice, my steak once again, and that. Another way that you can do this for breakfast, let's say, right? Let's say you're getting some eggs, right? Now remember, the yolk does add a bit of fat, right? So if I'm gonna eat my egg with my yolk in it, I'm gonna count it as my protein and my fat, right? So I would have that. I would, like I said, have around the same pan, a palmful, and then maybe have some toast and some fruit, right? 1 to 2 carbs. Both carbs. I'm sorry. Both the toast, the bread, and the fruit counts as carbohydrates. Remember, your carbohydrates are made of fruits, veggies, anything coming from a grain or a grain source, like a flour, right? So anything like that will also fall into the carbohydrate category. Pastas, I'm sure you guys know, it's made out of flour, right? So yeah, and even the pasta falls into this category. I would literally, grab this plop. And this is when I realized, by the way, that I was like, pasta is not really like my jam, just to kind of when I'm in a calorie deficit, because I don't want to have just a little bit. I want to have a lot of it, right? So remember, there are ways to move, calories around and foods around to make room for those things. So it's not like I never eat pasta, right? It's just that I move my food throughout the week to make sure that I am able to consume these things, right? Another thing to kind of consider, right? Let's say you're having dinner, right? And let's say you're pairing. This might be for both of you ladies wondering about the alcohol and the measuring, right? What I would do in that case is I would have my protein. My pump protein. Always, always, always remember, if you're trying to lose body fat, protein is going to be your best friend. Okay. And then if I do want to have, let's say, a glass of wine with that, I'm going to count that as my carb and my fat, right? So I'm going to try to get a very lean protein, maybe like a chicken breast or like some type of white fish. All white fishes, by the way, and this is, this is something I kind of noticed as I was like treating patients and looking up and making up their plans, that pretty much all any kind of fish that is white or any seafood that is white is going to be very low in fat, right? So I don't even have to worry about that. I just got to make sure that I don't add too much fat when I'm cooking it, right? I'll maybe use like a grapeseed oil spray. And then I'll have my glass of wine and maybe some steamed veggies with it or on a salad, right? So one of my favorite foods, right? And sometimes depending on how much activity you've had throughout the day, you can, have room for a little bit more. One of my favorite things, and I know if you guys have seen me out in gatherings, or if you guys have ever come to any of my gatherings, right? You see that I'm a very, I make a lot of ceviche, right? The reason for that is because shrimp has, very little fat, right? And then I will, that way you can control the amount of protein that you're getting, right? So I'll put some avocado in there, but I'll also have either baked chips, right, with very little fat in it, or just regular chips, so that way, people can have their fat. I personally, when I serve that to my guests, I want to make sure that the chunks of avocado are big enough for them to kind of put them to the side if they don't want them, right? So I want to make sure, hi Erica, I want to make sure that they're able to pick the fat if they don't want to have it or pick it off. I know sometimes I'm like, ooh, I want to have the chips with that, but I don't want to have the avocado in the ceviche, right? So I'll kind of like scoop a little bit of ceviche and then I'll make sure to leave the avocado out, right? Once again, guys, remember, it's your choice. It's your food. You're the one that are going to be eating them. But I want to make sure that I show you guys a few tips on how some people may approach things. So remember, guys, Erica, thank you for joining us. You can go ahead and ask any questions. Like I said, this is our Ask a Dietitian talks. Right now, I'm going over through some of the questions that people have DM'd us. So feel free to post anything on the chat. But yeah, so guys, remember, going out doesn't need to be scary, doesn't need to be something that you shield away from. I know for my patients, we literally walk them through how to eat out, right? Because we know that that's something that in the past they may have, kind of not gone out with friends because they're afraid that they're going to gain weight. So we definitely know that there's a social component to going out, eating, and being on your journey. So make sure that you guys feel comfortable, throughout your journey with us. Another question that we got asked, and I believe this was last week, and it was a very, very interesting question, and saying this lady, and I believe her name was Nancy. Nancy, I hope I'm not butchering your name, but I know you spelled it in a very unique way. So Nancy asked me, well, what if I am trying to lose weight, but my husband is not, right? That's really, 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 really important. And I feel like that's a struggle that a lot of people that are married or living with a partner may come across, where, one person's trying to accomplish one thing and the other person is not. And it's not that they're not supporting them. It's just that they're not, they're, eating styles are different, right? Like they're two different people. So at that point, I would say if you can serve food kind of like in that buffet style, that goes a long way in a very good way. And this is also, by the way, one of the strategies that we used to teach at the nutrition clinic when I used to work with children, right? Is because from what is being served, people can decide how much and what they're going to be eating, right? So, for example, if you're making a soup, right? Kind of put that soup in the middle and maybe kind of having some of the other components outside for that to happen. I know, but I've actually done that with some of my friends, and they loved it. I remember I once did it with pozole. So if you guys don't know what pozole is, it's like a soup made out of hominy grain, right? And it normally has chicken in there, right? So what I did is I cooked it just like we normally would, but instead of putting the chicken in there, right, I put the chicken in and I scooped some of it out and kind of served it on a plate at the side. So that way, if somebody wanted just the hominy, they could eat just that. If people wanted more or extra chicken, something which is why I've done often is that I have, I'll put extra chicken on my pozole, right? And I put extra cabbage and extra of the veggies, right? Because once again, remember people's energy needs. And if you really trust your body's really, really, really good at gravitating towards what it needs, right? So that's one of the things that I would recommend that you do, that, so that way people don't feel like they're missing out, right? I'll give you guys an example. So if you guys have ever seen my boyfriend, he's like literally almost twice my size, right? So there's no way I could eat the same amount of energy that he would. I would like, gain weight, very, very quickly. But I am aware of what his needs are and what my needs are, right? So if he needs, seconds or thirds or whatever, I'm like, yeah, go ahead, right? So because I know that, not only are we both active, but, may have different energy needs. Let me show you another way in which you can apply that. Let's say you're having some pasta, some chicken pasta, right? You want to make sure like you serve the pasta in one plate, and then you serve the chicken or the meatballs in another, so people would kind of serve themselves in that way, and the veggie maybe in another. Erica, I see your question says, would you recommend food tracking apps in order to track macros, or do you think that puts too much mental strain on the journey? Ooh, that's a really, really good one, Erica. So my answer to that would be, it depends on the individual, right? You know yourself. If back in the day, like you hated math and you're like, numbers freak me out, macros might be a little too much for you as well, right? So you definitely want to make sure that you stick to what you like. I find out that whenever people stick to what they know and what they like, they tend to stick to that longer, right? So if, tracking your macros, I know way back in the day, I remember like when I was in high school, I tried to, count calories and I tried to look them up, and that was just too much for me, right? I was just like, I can't do this. I'm almost obsessing about like, oh, does this have too much calories or not, right? So that was not for me. I've definitely used, Chronometer is the one app that I would say, to my knowledge right now, is the most accurate. A lot of the foods that they get is from the USDA database, which is the most accurate database for food that we have here in the US. So I would definitely say that if somebody is trying to look at that, I would highly recommend that. I'm not sponsored by them, guys, once again, but I'm just kind of giving you tools and hands. For those, Erica, that may not want to do macro counting, once again, the hand guidelines, right? So the palm of protein with the thickness, right? The palm, the circumference of your hand and the thickness of your hands, right? Like a handful, whatever would fit in here, of grains. This is going to be your carbs, right? Once again, ain't nobody got fat off of veggies, right? So you can have as many veggies as you like, and then a thumb of fat. So like, this much of like oil and stuff like that, right? One of the tips that I gave earlier was that if you're going to have a red meat or any meat with like fat content, count the protein as your fat in your protein. So that's a really, really good way of doing that. Thank you for that. Another question that we got asked back in this, like, how do I distribute my calories? How do I distribute, if I am doing Chronometer, right, or if I am doing MyFitnessPal, how do I know what I should do, right? So now this really depends on your lifestyle, right? Some people, in my question before that would even be like, what's your goal, right? Is your goal to lose body fat or is your goal to just maintain? Let me give you an example. I'm just maintaining right now. I know a lot of you guys knew that I was getting ready for, a big weekend that I had in April and May. So what I did at that point, I was trying to lose body fat, right? So I definitely kind of cut my calories a little bit more throughout the week because I know on the weekends I usually go out with friends and family. In maintenance mode, I do exactly the same thing. The only difference is that I don't cut down my fats as much Monday through Friday. So I'm right now I'm a maintenance mode. So I'm probably going to cut down a little bit more for the summer. So let me give you an example of what I'll do with both. Okay, so maintenance, right? I would eat maybe a little bit less calories, right? Maybe a little bit less, fats and carbs. I personally prefer lowering my fats just because I know that fats have the most amount of calories and I can create a deficit a lot faster that way, right? So for example, instead of eating a steak Monday through Friday, or, I'll stick to chicken and fish, right? Or ground turkey. Ground turkey is actually pretty lean as well, right? So I'll do that Monday through Friday, and then come the weekends, sure, I'm gonna have my steak. Sure, I'm gonna have whatever I want. I'm gonna have a few drinks, but because I know Monday through Friday I'll be in that deficit, right? Now, if I'm trying to lose body fat, then I'll definitely make sure to cut down a little bit of my carbs and a little bit more of my fats, right? So what I do is maybe instead of having 2 tablespoons for breakfast, or a tablespoon and a half on my toast, right? I might just stick to 1 tablespoon or half of a tablespoon, right? One thing that I'm like on a kick right now is avocado toast, like egg whites on avocado toast. It's one of the most amazing things ever, guys. If you guys like to have it, my mouth is just watering from thinking about it. It was my breakfast this morning, right? So maybe instead of having half of the avocado, I'd have a fourth or maybe a third of the avocado. So that's one of the ways in which you can lower your fats throughout the weeks, Monday through Friday. And then come the weekends, you can have some fun, right? So remember, there's no need for you to not be able to do that, right? So if you guys need more guidance, but like I said, we have something pretty cool coming up, and that's that you can schedule your a one-time only free 20-minute consultation. So if you guys have any questions on that, check out our page, check out our website. Because we definitely want to help you guys as much as we can, because we really, really want to make sure that we equip you with the science. We see another question. What are your thoughts on meat alternatives, Beyond Meat, Impossible, etc.? Ooh, that's a really, really good question, Erica. Okay. I am from the school of thought that the more wholesome the food, the better it is, right? Now, although a lot of these meats are made out of like beans and legumes and all these things, they go into a very, very high processing phase or process in order to, kind of get to that patty, right? If you look at a lot of the alternative foods, right, a lot of these foods are extremely high in sodium, right? So from that perspective, my kind of flag goes up a little bit. I don't want to consume things on a regular basis that have a lot of sodium. The reason for that is because, remember, we're like a balloon, right? And our bodies are made of 70% water. And sodium is one of the things that can make us retain water. So we're going to feel puffier. But not just that. Over the course of time, if we adopt this as a habit, right? Like, let's say all I ate was Beyond Meat. I'm just going to give you an example. My arteries would expand and would swell up because my blood would be, there would be more liquid in me, right? That can over time create high blood pressure, hypertension, right? So I don't want to do that to my body. I don't want to stress my body more than I already do, right? My body already does a lot for me. So because of that, I do tend to watch my sodium, right? So once in a while, how about it? Treat it like your food, right? But now let's say that you are a vegetarian or vegan, and you're saying, Carla, but I really just want to stick to legumes for for my protein intake, right? That's fine. Just have the actual thing. Have the actual, black beans and kidney beans. Put them on a salad. Make your own patties, right? So there is a really give and take. I'm not for them, nor am I against them, right? I'm just saying, look at what they are. Learn to read the nutrition label, because with that you'll have a lot of information, right? If something is high sodium, right, I recommend that everything around in that day be very low sodium, right? For example, let me give you an example. So let's say I go to a restaurant, or I even buy a Beyond Meat patty to make myself a burger, right? Then I'm gonna make sure for breakfast all my foods are gonna be whole foods, right? So let's say I'm not vegetarian. Let's just say I like the taste of the Beyond Meat, right? I'm gonna have some eggs or some egg whites with some toast and some fruit, right? And then maybe for my snack, I may have some yogurt, right, with some peanut butter and some more fruit, right? let's say for lunch, I might want to have like a sandwich, and just making sure that bread is not super high in sodium either, right? And let's say I want to make that sandwich out of like deli turkey. I want to make sure that I get the low sodium deli turkey, okay? And I put my lettuce and my veggies in there. And my other snack, I might have an apple with peanut butter, almond butter. Are really, really good. My mouth is just watering just thinking about it, right? And maybe another source of protein, right? Maybe a little bit more yogurt. So there's so many different things that you guys can eat. Like I said, when your mind goes to how can I have this, it opens up a lot of possibilities for you. A lot of the times people think that in order to lose weight, lose body fat, they need to restrict from. No, 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 no. You don't need to restrict from your favorite foods. If you think about it, how can I have this, right? And this is where, the help of a registered dietitian might come in, because they can say, oh, okay, all we need to do is move these foods around, right? Or in the case of the impossible meats, right? My biggest red flag with them is the sodium content, to be honest, right? So without it, be like, okay, let's just move the sodium around throughout the whole day, and then just have it, because you are allotted some sodium in your day. Duh, like it's an electrolyte, so you definitely need it, especially if you sweat more, right? I know I sweat a lot when I work out, right? So I definitely need to replenish those electrolytes back in. So great questions on that. Another questions that we got asked, and this might be the final one, guys, is that what if you have children in the house, right? What if you have children and you're trying to lose body fat, and then your husband or partner may not, want to, or they're like, go ahead, babe, I got you, support you. However, I want my food, right? Or the kiddos. We know that sometimes kiddos tend to gravitate towards more carbohydrates rich foods, because that's what their bodies require in order to grow, right? So at that point, I'll say, once again, serve kind of like buffet style if you can. Let me give you an example. Let's say you're doing quesadillas, or let's say you're doing tacos, right? Maybe have the taco meat in one pan or one plate in the middle of the table, and then let's have the tortillas in like in a little tortilla basket, right? And let's have like maybe other components, some veggies, right? For them to kind of grab and see what they need, right? You might have some avocado in there, some guacamole. And although you're watching your calories, right? You're watching your fats, you might want to say, hey, maybe instead of having 6 tacos, let me have 4, and let me have some more of this veggies, right? That way people can have, as many, tacos as they want. We actually had that, happened to me the other day with my boyfriend and his nieces, right? I made something called enjitomatadas. It's a very cultural dish that my mom made me when I was a little kid. So I thought, I was like, oh, they like them. But I knew that, A, they're not Hispanic. So these foods are probably not, it's their first time encountering them. So they helped me cook. By the way, it was an amazing. I had 2 little helpers in the kitchen. I was like, yes, ladies, we are doing this, right? And when it was time to eat, they just like, they made their own, right? And they liked it. One of them picked at it once or twice, and it's like, I'm done. And I was like, that's okay. You don't have to eat it. Once again, kids will gravitate towards what they need. Sure enough, like an hour later, they came back around and they're like, oh, I have seen this happen a lot even with my own nieces and nephews, where they'll say, I don't want to eat. They'll come back and be like, I'm hungry. And I'm like, okay, well, here's a chicken, here's a tortilla. What do you want out of it? And they're like, oh, I want a little bit of this and a little bit of that, right? So always remember, guys, the more we can let children decide what their bodies need, they're going to have a much, much better relationship with food afterwards. So I want to make sure that you guys, I give you that information, because I know that, raising children is not easy. I don't have any of my own yet, but I've definitely seen what moms go through. And by the way, my hat goes off to all the mamas out there, because I know you guys do so much for your families. Right. So, but yeah, don't be scared to kind of put the food in the middle of the table and let people kind of choose. It'll be less stressful for you. It'll be a lot more enjoyable. You guys won't have to be fighting us to eat your food, finish your veggies, right, or anything like that. And then everybody will once again have a more enjoyable time and relationship with food. Well, thank you guys for joining us. This is it. Like I said, on the Friday of every 3rd week of the month, we're here live to answering you guys any questions. You guys can ask them in the chat or DM us the questions. We do save them as, I have my little, little note hands. If I don't know the answer to a question, I promise to look it up. And once again, thank you guys for joining us. Have a wonderful